With the 2023 NFL Draft in the rearview mirror, in addition to the big roster building pillars of the offseason, it's time to take a look at what the current 53-man roster projection looks like today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, we're doing a 53-man roster projection here on today's podcast. We'll do segment 1 on offense, segment 2 on defense, and then I want to close the episode with the news about the Bills Stadium officially being official. So we'll touch on that at the end. But the meat and potatoes today is a 53-man roster projection. And now that the draft is behind us, the big waves of free agency are behind us, I think the Bills will probably add a few more players. I can certainly see an edge rusher added. I can see another running back added. I can see a linebacker or two added to the mix. But the nucleus of this roster is pretty much set. And so it's fun to consider now that they've made all these different roster moves. Well, who's making the team? And so that's the focus of what we're going to do here today on the podcast. Let's start with the offensive side of the football and the quarterback position. I think the Bills will keep 2 quarterbacks. That's been their norm. And I think their names are Josh Allen and Kyle Allen. That's your QB1 and your QB2. Matt Barkley, the only other quarterback on the roster, I think he winds up being on the practice squad, but not a rostered player. So 2 quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Kyle Allen. That's an easy one. Let's move to running back. And the Bills don't have a ton of players at running back, and that's why I alluded to them adding one. I think they will. I think they're going to want to get through the preseason with another back that can carry the football. And so I think the Bills will keep 4 running backs and 1 fullback. The running backs being James Cook, Damian Harris, Nyheim Hines, Latavius Murray, and the fullback being Reggie Gilliam, with the only cut here being Jordan Mims, the undrafted free agent out of Fresno State. And so not a whole lot of conversation to be had here. It's pretty cut and dry. You've only got 6 players for 5 spots, and the UDFA out of Fresno State's the one that's on the outside looking in. Everyone else here is a vet or, James Cook entering year 2 as a second-round pick who's expected to be this team's lead running back. And so that's why I think you're going to see the Bills add another ball carrier at some point at a minimum to help get them through the preseason, but also you want to stash some guys on the practice squad. And so I think you're going to see some more names here added to the mix. I think the Bills are going to roster Latavius Murray based on the contract they gave him. Not that it was a ton of money, but there's enough guarantees in there for him to at least be interested. And I think that they're going to want another bigger back to go with Damian Harris, right? I mean, that role, that running back, that bigger back that can help in pass pro, that can help in short yardage, you don't want to be one snap away from not having him. And so I think Latavius Murray has a really good chance to make this team. I'll say he was a little bit of a fringe guy for me, but not that much of one. I thought he was pretty much in line to make it. At wide receiver, the Bills' magic number at wide receiver typically is 6. And so I have them keeping 6 receivers. This one was pretty straightforward as well. Steph Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, and Justin Shorter, the Bills' 5th-round pick out of Florida. And so that puts Desmond Patton, Tyrell Shavers, Jalen Wayne, Keyshawn Johnson, and Isaiah Coulter as players that won't make the 53. And so, again, another position group where I think it's pretty chalky. Would be surprised if it was any other combination. Now, they could certainly add somebody that makes it interesting, but if everyone's healthy, I think that's your 6. And that's pretty interesting because that's a 50% turnover, right? You got 3 new players here at the wide receiver position. Diggs, Davis, Shakir carrying over from last year. Hardy, Sherfield, and Shorter are all new this year. At tight end, another pretty straightforward conversation. I will say this. I think the Bills will roster 3 tight ends. If they're going to lean into 12 personnel like we think they're going to, and they just drafted another tight end with their first-round pick, we've heard Brandon Beane talk about this. It's definitely going to be a factor this coming season. And if that's going to be a factor, you're not going to just roster 2. You need a backup to those players because it's going to be a core piece of what this operation is. And so obviously Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid at tight end, but I still think Quentin Morris has a real good chance to make this roster as the tight end 3, with the only cut here being Zach Davidson. In fact, that's another position where I can see the Bills adding a body here in the coming weeks to kind of beef it up and have more options for them to consider. But Knox, Kincaid, Morris, your 3 rostered tight ends, Zach Davidson, a cut candidate. That gets us to the offensive line. This is a little more interesting because the Bills do have a lot of depth, some veteran depth, some young players as well. And so I think you look at it like this. You've got 6 guys that I fully anticipate to make this roster: Deion Dawkins, Connor McGovern, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, Spencer Brown, Osiris Torrance. Those are your 6 guys that I think are absolute locks to make the roster. Then you have a group of David Quessenberry, David Edwards, Ike Bucker, Tommy Doyle, Nick Broker, all in line to make it. If they keep 9, then 4 of them, or if they keep 9, then only 3 gets to make the roster. If they keep 10, then 4 gets to stick. And the way that I look at it is this. Beyond the 6 that I mentioned, I think David Quessenberry, and I think David Edwards, and I think Ike Bucker, those 3. Quessenberry, a 4-hole backup that they brought him back from last year. David Edwards, who I think is an NFL starter. I think he absolutely is an NFL starting caliber player that the Bills get to enjoy as a depth player this year. And Ike Bucker, who's kind of a cockroach on this roster, right? It seems like he just keeps sticking around. Even they re-signed him after he tore his Achilles late in the season. They're pretty committed to Ike Bucker, and I think they really like his versatility as a guy that can play guard and center. And so if that's the plan there, Dawkins, McGovern, Morse, Bates, Brown, Torrance, Quessenberry, Edwards, Bucker, that gets you to 9. Tommy Doyle, let's put an asterisk by his name because there's 2 players I'm going to put an asterisk by their name. One is Tommy Doyle. One is Jordan Phillips. I think one of them starts the year on the PUP list. Tommy Doyle coming back from an ACL tear, Jordan Phillips coming back from rotator cuff surgery. And so if either isn't cut, I think PUP is very much a possibility for those players. And so right now I have either Tommy Doyle or Jordan Phillips going on the PUP list. So I'm going to tell you that 54 guys make the roster, but just know that my hedge there is that either Doyle or Phillips is on the PUP list. And so flip a coin, whoever it's going to be. But I needed that to happen to get to the 53-man roster that I want. So flip a coin. Whatever one you want to say is on the PUP list between Doyle and Phillips, that's your path to getting 53 on the roster. So there's your offensive players. In just a moment, we're going to talk about the defensive side of the football. But first, I need to tell you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the planet. And these things are awesome. They're not only delicious, they're healthy for you. They're delicious because they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they have great flavors like churro, peanut butter puff, brownie batter, cookie dough. So many great flavors covered in 100% real chocolate, but they're delicious. They're low calorie. They're low sugar. They're high in protein. It's like eating a candy bar, but it's good for you. Don't know how Built was able to thread the needle, but they certainly have, and I love them. If you want to check them out, you can go to Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKEDON15. It'll get you 15% off of your next order. Or you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club, and you can get a box right off of the shelf. So if you go to the Walmart, head to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. They got the cookies and cream. They got the double chocolate bar. They got coconut puff there. If you go to Sam's Club, they can give you a 13-bar box with kind of a variety pack. So check them out, Built.com, Walmart, Sam's Club, and you will thank me later. Let's shift this conversation to the defensive side of the football as we work through this post-draft 53-man roster for the Buffalo Bills. At defensive end, I have them keeping 4. Again, Von Miller, I have him starting the year on the PUP list, and I know the workout videos are insane with what this guy's doing. Brandon Beane called him a genetic freak, but let's be honest, the Bills need Von Miller to be fully healthy and ready to be Von Miller late in the season and in the playoffs. And so for as much as I want to see Von Miller as quickly as possible, you got to make sure he's ready to go, because when he comes back in, he's got to be full go. And if that means pushing it another month into the season, it is more than worth it to me. I mean, the Bills not having Von Miller, not having Daquan Jones in that playoff game against Cincinnati, you felt it. You could tell those guys weren't around. And so for as anxious as I am for Von Miller to be back on this football team, I think they got to be very cautious here and make sure that he's ready to go late in the season. So I don't have him counting towards the 53. I have him on the PUP list, which leaves Greg Rousseau, Shaq Lawson, AJ Epinesa, and Boogie Basham on the roster. The only guy getting cut is Kingsley Jonathan, which tells you that they need to add another player here. And I hope it's one of these veterans, right? I've went through this list of Leonard Floyd, Yannick Ngakoue, Carlos Dunlap, Frank Clark, Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram. Give me one of those players, because there's obviously a very clear path for them to play. They get to play for a contender. I mean, one of those guys could probably come in and start opposite of Greg Rousseau and then give you even more depth for whenever Von Miller is back. That's not a bad thing. And so I'm very much rooting for the Bills to sign one of those players. The guy I'd really like is Leonard Floyd. And the reason why is because it's a different type of skill set. All these other guys are long arms, heavy hands, power, compression style rushers. Von Miller's your speed, burst, bend guy. Get another one of those. And that way you can preserve a lot of the foundational principles of what your defense looks like when Von Miller's in the lineup, right? And there's a very clear path to a Leonard Floyd coming in and doing that type of thing. I'd love for that to be the addition. But, I mean, it's going to come down to those players accepting lesser money, right? All those guys I just talked about are proven players in the NFL. And some of them are younger, like Ngakoue and Leonard Floyd. Sure, they want to get paid, but if it's not there for them, you might as well go to an opportunity like Buffalo. You're going to get playoff checks most likely. Have some incentives in there, but I would love for the Bills to get one of those guys. They can clearly use it at the defensive end position, because right now you're looking at one of Lawson, Epinesa, and Basham starting opposite of Rousseau, with all of them playing a significant amount of snaps. Let's go to the defensive tackle position. Again, Jordan Phillips, your asterisk player here. So Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Poona Ford, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, and then whichever one you want to pick, Jordan Phillips or Tommy Doyle, one of them on the PUP list to start the year to go with Von Miller. But Poona Ford really, really changes this group for me. I'm excited about him being part of the mix, what he can mean for some of the odd fronts that they can run, more gap control stuff to go with some penetration looks. He really adds something here that excites me. We talked about that earlier this week on the podcast, so go back and listen to it if you want my full thoughts on Poona Ford. But nice little opportunity here for us to relish in him being part of this team. So that puts the defensive tackles on the outside looking in as Kendall Vickers, Brandon Bryant, Elianku, Cortez Broughton, and DJ Dale. I'm sure a couple of those will be on the practice squad. And so that looks pretty formidable. Linebacker was an interesting one for me. This was probably the hardest one, because I don't think the Bills are going to roster 7. And that's all they have right now is 7. So that's why I said, look, I think another linebacker could very easily be added to this mix. So the way I have it right now is Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Tyrell Dotson, Tyler Medikevich, Dorian Williams, and A.J. Klein. And I have Balin Spector as the one that gets cut. I don't think they're going to keep 7. That's just too many. And it came down to A.J. Klein versus Balin Spector. Well, A.J. Klein has so much experience with Sean McDermott, like 7 years of experience with Sean McDermott. And I think the team is really going to value that, especially with so many young players here, with Dorian Williams, with Terrell Bernard, with Tyrell Dodson, with Balin Spector, who I'm sure the Bills would love to have back on their practice squad in this scenario. But that type of presence in the room to go with Matt Milano is a big deal. And we talked about Brandon Beane in his comment about A.J. Klein. Like, look, he's here to be an asset to the room. And I think they just are aware that they have so many young players, and having that guy around is pretty critical. I mean, that's the player that's got the most time with McDermott of anybody on this roster. And so I don't know that he's going to have a big role. He's probably a nice, break glass in case of emergency type player to have around if you need him. But I think as a depth player, special teams, and being an asset to the defense in this linebacker room, that's what tipped the scales in favor of Klein for me over Balin Spector. And Balin Spector, let's be honest, he was like a 7th-round pick last year. He was inactive a lot. I mean, maybe there's something there, maybe not, but that's why I picked Klein over Spector, although I could see it going either way. At cornerback, I have the Bills keeping 6 of those: Tre'Davious White, Kyer Elam, Taron Johnson, Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, and Saran Neal. Pretty nice group of corners there. I really like that. It's the most comfortable I've felt about a Bills cornerback room in a long, long time. A lot of depth, some experience, proven talent, upside, it's all there. So that means Jamarcus Ingram, Alex Austin, and Kyler McMichael don't make the roster. So Alex Austin, Nick Broker, neither one of them I had in the mix to make the roster. I think, like I said, I think they need help. They need injuries to do it. Or they just come in and perform at a level that makes it impossible for them to cut, which I think is probably unlikely. At safety, the Bills, I have them keeping 4 of them. Jordan Poyer. I didn't think we were going to keep him. So I'm still excited every time I say Jordan Poyer. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Taylor Rapp, and Damar Hamlin, the 4 safeties, with Cam Lewis, Jared Maiden, Zane Anderson as guys that get cut. I think there's a conversation to be had between Damar Hamlin and Cam Lewis, right, for that 4th safety spot. But I go back to last year, Damar Hamlin started over Cam Lewis. I think Damar Hamlin's a better player than Cam Lewis. Now, Cam Lewis can provide some versatility at corner as well, but I think the Bills are in good shape at corner. And so I think they kind of told us when Hamlin was the starter over Lewis last year that they prefer Hamlin. And so if everything medically checks out, which it appears it does, Damar's the guy. Then your specialist, this is real easy: Tyler Bass, Sam Martin, Reed Ferguson. And that's how I see it shaken out right now. Obviously, there's going to be some new players added. There's going to be injuries. There's things that'll change this. But as we look at this today, that's how I see it all unfolding. All right, folks, after a quick break, I want to talk quickly about the new stadium now that it is official. Be right back. So on Thursday afternoon, the news came through that it is officially official that the Bills' new stadium is happening and construction begins immediately, which is awesome, right? Very excited for this new stadium. I hope you are as well. I don't want to get too much into the details here. We've kind of talked about them in the past, but here's what we know is that it's going to be completed, or it's scheduled to be completed in July of 2026, which means it will be open for the 2026 regular season. So, folks, I'll see you there. Can't wait to take in a game at the new stadium. And hopefully everything stays on schedule, right? Like, the worst thing in the world would be for us to get all excited, and then the next thing you know, it's going to be 2027. So let's get this stadium built so that it really opens in 2026. That's going to cost $1.56 billion. A lot of money. Expensive to build stadiums, and that's how much it's going to cost to build this one. The site is 242 acres. I've been told that an acre is the size of a football field, so 242 of those. It's pretty big, right? 1.35 million square feet. So this is a big deal. We've seen the renderings of the stadium. It looks beautiful to me, right? I think it's aesthetically pleasing, looks good. Visually, inside and outside, looks like a great place to watch a football game. I love that it's going to be a grass surface. That's a big deal, right? These surfaces that exist in the NFL, everybody seems to like the grass the most. And so I like that it's going to be grass for the Bills. In fact, the Tennessee Titans are switching from grass to like turf. And Ryan Tannehill's mad about it, and he should be, which is crazy to me. Like, not that Tannehill's mad about it. It's crazy to me that there's so much information out there about injury prevention. There's so much preference that's clear from players to play on grass, yet teams keep switching to artificial surfaces. Now, credit the Bills that they're going to switch to a grass surface, and so I love that. I hope that they'll stick with it. I mean, even the Panthers recently did that. They switched from a grass surface to an artificial surface. But check this out. They had like a soccer match at Bank of America Stadium here in Charlotte. It was one of the friendlies. I don't know how this all goes. There's a big soccer match where one of the big teams from Europe, a couple of the big teams from Europe came over and played a game. And for that game, they put down grass. They took out the artificial surface and put down grass and then put the artificial surface back in. You kidding me? Weird. So I love that the Bill Stadium is going to be grass. What's really interesting to me is these wind confusion elements. I don't know if you guys read about this, but the way that the outside of the stadium is being built and designed is it's like there's different levels with it, which means that when the wind comes in contact with it, it's going to kind of like push it up, and then there's different levels to it that's going to confuse the wind and make it less windy in the stadium. And so we know that it's an open air stadium, right? And so you have Western New York elements, right? South towns. We know how this all goes. But I'm interested to see how that all comes together, because that's the part that's hard sometimes is you want Josh Allen to go out there and complete every pass and throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. But you're like, yeah, sometimes that's hard in these elements. Well, maybe that'll help them a little bit, have less wind out there. Large portion of the seats are covered. I'm sure we all like that. It's going to hold about 60,000 people, which is obviously a little smaller than what it is now. And I'm sure you've listened to Ron Raccuia talk about the reasons for that. I'm sure that they didn't just choose to sell less tickets per game. There's probably a lot of data that supports that number. I'm not privy to it, but I was a little bit surprised that they went down in size. But there's a reason for it. But at the end of the day, what do I love most about this stadium? I love that it's happening. I love that it's happening. This journey of being a Bills fan. I'm not like the oldest Bills fan. I was born in 1986. So I've seen a fair amount of it. But for a large part of it, you're nervous that the team's going to move, right? We've all shared in that thought at some point in our Bills fandom, and especially when Ralph Wilson passed and the team was going to be sold, and we knew the cast of characters. Bon Jovi, we knew that if Bon Jovi buys a team, it's going to Toronto. Donald Trump's in the mix, and the Pagulas. And we knew if it went to the Pagulas that it probably wasn't going to leave, right? And so fortunately, it was sold to the Pagulas, and we got some confidence there that it's not going anywhere. Certainly, that's what the messaging was. We knew that they have deep roots to the Western New York community. Obviously, a ton of interest with the Sabres. And then there's the stadium piece of it, right? And you hear Roger Goodell come on press conferences or whatever, radio interviews and stuff, and kept on saying, like, for the Bills to be viable in Western New York, they have to get a new stadium. And I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about Western New York and the challenges that exist to build things, but it feels like there's a lot of challenges that exist and a lot of projects just never happen, right? So I've certainly had a level of doubt that this would come to fruition, right? And even through this process where we've seen renderings, but you're still waiting on these final stamps of approval and all these things to happen, finally it does. So I just love that it's happening. And I mean, they're not going anywhere, right? There's still that piece of of reassurance and affirmation that I relish in, that this team's not going anywhere and that I can be a fan of the Buffalo Bills forever. It's nice to cross that off the list of things you got to think about. So I'm excited about it. Excited to get up there in 2026, watch some football games there at whatever the heck the new stadium is going to be called. Like, excited to get up there this year as well. We're going to get the stadium, or we're going to get the schedule next week. So that'll be a fun piece of content where I really break down the schedule. That's next week. Of course, lots of Buffalo Bills conversation coming your way. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. If you like what's happening here, would love for you to like this video. If you're watching on YouTube, share it on social media. Tell a friend about the podcast. All of that's so helpful. I love these months that are ahead here. I know that there's no games imminent, right? There's not a whole lot going on in the NFL calendar, but it allows me to get really creative with the different things that we can bring to the table and talk about on this podcast every single day. So join me for the ride. Join me for the ride. I'd love it. And I hope that you have a great weekend. I want to say one thing here. I'm recording this on May 4th, which is my anniversary with my wife. So happy anniversary to my amazing wife, Lorraine. Look forward to celebrating that as soon as I get done recording this podcast. And if you want to say happy anniversary to Mrs. Marino, go to my Instagram. I put a post there. My handle is @the_Joe Marino. Let her know that Bills Mafia loves her and appreciates her. She loves you guys. Every time we're at a game or we're in Western New York, and she gets to meet, listeners to the podcast and Bills fans, and it's so cool. So send her some love. She'll appreciate that. All right, folks, that's it for today. That's it for this week on the podcast. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again on Monday.